Hello, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up. I'm Carter Wilson, and this is the podcast where I get to chit chat with other writers. It's been a few years now that I've been doing this, and man, the connections I've made, the cool people I've talked to, the conversations I've had. If you are a listener who is interested in the art of writing and what a publication journey looks like, that's mostly what we talk about. So this might be just the podcast for you. Before we get started, I just want to give a plug to my company, Unbound Writer. You can head to unboundwriter.com and check out my self-guided online classes. You can reach out to me for a free consulting call for one-on-one writing coaching, and we can see if we're a good fit to work together. And I do all sorts of different coaching with manuscripts. And I also do retreats and seminars. So you can check out that page within unboundwriter.com and see what I have next. Right now, I currently have a seminar in Denver, Colorado in March that I'll be teaching a 4-hour class on committing to your novel. All right, so today on the show, I had the wonderful Sandra Block. I should say Dr. Sandra Block. She's a neurologist. I know Sandra, and we talked about this in the episode because we used to have the same publisher who put us with two other writers on a small tour in the Midwest. 2016, 2017, something like that. So I got to spend some nice time with Sandra. Got to know her pretty well. And this is the first time I've had her on the podcast. So Sandra writes thrillers just like me. And her sixth book just came out a couple months ago. And it is The Bachelorette Party, which looks phenomenal. And I absolutely love the cover, and it's got some fantastic reviews and blurbs. So I implore you to please check that out. But her, she's also a neurologist, so she's got obviously a very I was going to say a job that requires many, many hours a week, but I have no idea. Maybe doctors work 40 hours a week. I have zero idea, but I know she's busy. She's busy. So we talked about that question a little bit of how do you find time, and just about jumping around from publishers to publisher, and just feeling gratitude about any kind of level of success with writing, and also about how do you define success as a writer. And we kind of both agreed that if you're defining success at meaning you're supporting yourself with hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in writing income, that's probably I'm not saying that that's a bad goal to have, but it's probably a goal that could be setting yourself up for failure. The way that I look at it more is, everything that you do as a writer is some kind of investment. So even if that means, in my case, 3 books that I spent years writing that never sold, I don't look at that as a waste. I look at that as part of my investment. And your investment can take decades to pay off. But I think if you commit to it and you can be vulnerable and learn and accept rejection and have a true passion for it, it will pay off. It might take some time. But it is about kind of reflecting upon the gratitude of what you have, the joy of writing itself, even though it's not always joyful. But it is a lot about the energy that you give off as a writer, and the mindset that you occupy as you look at this. And the best thing that you can do with writing, I think, is to treat it as you would a job. Give it that kind of commitment, and to not look at it as a hobby, even if you haven't made $1 from it, because it is about how you approach the art of writing from a mental space that I think will really determine where your writing career goes. Anyway, we get into all of that a little bit, and we just got a chance to catch up. It was nice to see her face, nice to hear her voice. You're going to like this one, friends. This is my conversation with Sandra Block. Obviously, it's funny when you just called me. I do have your number in my phone, it turns out, because we went on a book tour together.
Right.
eons ago. I don't know, 2016, 2017, something like that.
Right.
A mini book tour, kind of in the Midwest, I guess. Um, and that was wild because I remember having this experience that we would go and it was the two of us, Jenny Melchman, and oh my goodness,
Randall.
Randall
Randall
Silvas.
Silvis.
Thank you,
Yeah.
geez. Um, and we would go and it was great. But you'd go to these indie bookstores and sometimes there'd be three people. Um,
Well, do you remember we called it the 666 tour?
we did, that's right.
Yes. Because we never had more than six people. Right.
Right. And, but Source Books was very generous and put us on tour and stuff
Totally.
like that.
Absolutely.
And I remember I emailed Anna, my editor afterwards, and I just asked her, I'm like, look, it was great. Thank you so much. This and that. Just out of curiosity, how does this make sense for
Right.
you
Financially. Right.
and she's like, it doesn't have to make sense financially. A lot of it is about the relationships with the indie bookstores. I'm like, oh, that makes total sense that I never kind of even considered before.
Yeah. I'm
So,
going to a place that's a little more, that looks nicer.
oh, not just warmer.
No,
Yeah, go
now
under the
there's a
bed
little
and pull the
better.
covers up over your head.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I should do that too.
Um, but now I was just looking at your latest book, The Bachelorette Party, and you're not with Source Books. You're with who's the publisher?
Scarlet. Scarlet.
Okay,
It's an imprint from Mysterious Press.
right. So Otto's
Yes,
publication.
exactly.
So what have you? What number book is this for you?
6.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Well,
Does
thank
it
you.
does it feel any? Do books feel different when they come out to you after a certain point?
They kind of do. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's the publisher that it's based on a little bit, because I've been with a
sure.
bunch of different ones. I'm a little promiscuous that way.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, but I don't think that's the whole thing. I think every book is just hits you a little different.
Yeah, yeah, and it also depends, right, on your how emotionally attached you are to that particular book, if it's any different than and I've kind of learned, like for me, like I finish a book and after it's gone through all the edits and then with the publisher, you're kind of sick of it. At least
Right.
I am. I'm kind
Yeah,
of
for
like,
sure.
because at that point, by the time I'm doing edits with a publisher, I'm at least 20,000 words probably into something new. And so I'm in that falling in love period all over again, which I know is not going
Right.
to last. And
Right.
then it makes it harder to go back to your ex and be like, oh, I thought I was done with you.
Right. Oh, totally.
And then,
And at that point, I think you're not even like at all objective, because I'll sometimes read through it and be like, this, I can't even believe someone is publishing this. This is the worst crap I've ever read in my life.
right. And then from that point, from when you're kind of doing the heavy edits with your editors, like first and second round edits with your editor, from that point on, it's like probably a year before then it actually physically comes out, or upwards of a year. And then you've kind of like, not that you've forgotten about it, but because you've
Right.
started to ramp up and do, the PR stuff a few months out. But it is a little weird. I mean, there'll be times when I will kind of, be answering questions to somebody about what I'm writing now, realizing, oh my God, they're asking me about what's coming out, and I just totally screwed them up in my head.
Right. Oh yeah, no, I know. I was at getting my hair done, which you can't tell. Anyway, and one of the hairdressers said, "Oh, this is so crazy. Look at this name of this person that I just did the hair on." And she pointed out this name, and I'm like, should I know them? And it
Uh-huh.
was kind of an integral, I don't know, integral, but certainly a side character in my first book. So I was like
The same
completely
name.
embarrassed because I had no clue, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah, totally.
So
Totally. And when you don't go back and, I don't go back and look at anything. I certainly never read the book again because you've read it a million times. So when you get the physical copy, it just goes on my shelf. And then sometimes, if you're asked to do a reading, you got to go look for a part to read and you start reading it like, I kind of remember this.
Right, right, yes.
It's just, and that can strike me different ways. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is garbage. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this is better than I remember.
Right,
At least
right,
this one
exactly.
passage.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Like, who wrote this? Oh, that was me? Hi, wow.
it is weird because everything you write is just a timestamp of your life in
Right.
essence. And, you go back and read. For me, I go back and read old stuff if I ever look at it, and it's like, oh yeah, this is when my kids were 5 and 3. Now they're in college. My perspective on life was completely different, and kids might be much more of a factor in that book than they are now. So it is just weird, and we change and we grow, and and your voices change, and when people bring up old stuff like, oh, this your first was my favorite, and I'm like, wow, I'm such a different writer. And
Right,
not that I don't like my first book, but
right,
it's just weird to have somebody say that that's their favorite when I'm just like, oh, I was just still trying to figure shit out back then.
right. Absolutely. I mean, the first couple, there was no like different times, being used, dual time frames or
Right.
different character voices or anything like that. And so that adds so much to your armamentarium. Does it make it better? I think so.
Yeah.
I would say like this book, Bachelorette Party, is definitely unique in how much sort of fake primary source material I used,
Yeah.
that definitely was different. And it's interesting. My mother-in-law, who's 92,
Hmm.
was like, I don't understand. She just didn't understand a ton of it. Like, what is the Twitter thing? Like there were a lot of stuff I realized that actually is just about our time. It wouldn't make sense to someone 20 years ago either because there were no
Right.
computers and you know what I mean? So it was
Right.
funny. I just thought to myself, yeah, no, I get that. So, anyway,
Yeah.
I thought that was
Totally.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I've done stuff with transcripts. Like my one coming out has just tons of transcripts in it, and it's just fun to do something different. But I would say,
Right.
in general, I think my writing has become more simplified because I've just kind of, and that I think that's combined with me finding my voice, which I think happened maybe in my third or fourth published book. And I just realized like, oh, I write best just very directly, one singular first person present tense
Right.
point of view.
Right.
And this is what's happening. And I feel like that has resonated more with readers than stuff where I'm being maybe a little bit more complex with dual time frames or multiple character POVs or whatever. But it's just also how I happen to, I think, organically write best. So it's
Yeah.
just interesting how we change over time.
Yeah.
And did you, growing up, I don't remember if we ever talked about this, but I mean, you're a medical doctor, you're a
Right.
neurologist, right?
Right. Yeah.
So obviously, another huge component of your life that occupies a lot of time and that ostensibly occupies a different side of your brain to do that. But growing up, were you the creative kid? Were you the kid who wanted to go into the arts, or you were always kind of geared towards the medical profession?
No, I was more, a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer in my heart, but I sometimes will start like if I'm giving a talk and say I always wanted to be a writer, so I became a neurologist. I mean, like it is kind of silly,
Right.
but I'm not. I don't really have regrets about doing it this way because I've enjoyed that. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed, seeing patients. I enjoy it still, but my passion truly is still writing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's fair. And I think that's a good thing for listeners to hear. I mean, there's the cliche of the actor, the struggling actor who is a waiter, right? So not a profession that they're thinking like, I also love this and it provides income. I think with writers, I think we hit the reality very quickly of like, look, this is most of us, are already, some kind of professional and then start writing. So it's hard to say like, well, I'm just going to quit my day job in the hopes that
Right.
this will get me more than $1,000 advance on something 5 years from now. But same when I worked in a corporate job, like I enjoyed that too. That was a part of my brain, data analytics that I love and I still do it on my own. But it's just a different kind of passion. Whereas writing, I'm like, I could just see doing this for the rest of my life. With another type of job, you're like, yeah, 65 to retire sounds pretty good to me. So it is a difference, right?
It's funny because I was just talking to one of my old roommates about, that like getting like every article I can get my hands on about retiring. I'm just like, that's clickbait for me is, retiring. How can you really retire? What's good about retiring? Right. And I was saying to her that I feel kind of bad because like a lot of people I talk to are like, what? Retire? Why would I ever want to stop what I'm doing? I love what I'm, she said, there's that subset of people, but then there's people like us, like job is good. We're good at it. But, there's other things we want to do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of when I'm teaching writing, a lot of the students, I think we talk a lot about the psychology of writing because I think the psychology of a writer is the first and foremost thing that is going to either help them succeed or completely block them from ever going anywhere. And I think a lot of it to this point that you're making here is that they have this job, they started writing then on the side, and they never quite get away from treating it as a hobby. And so you're automatically diminishing this incredibly difficult, but yet massively fulfilling task, hopefully for most people. But they never give it the respect that it deserves. And therefore they don't make time for it. They don't prioritize it like they would a well-paying job, even if you're not making, because the money will come if you treat it, with that respect. And if you're willing to suffer the slings and arrows, learn, and just be consistent about it. But, if you treat it as a hobby, then it's going to fall by the wayside, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I think the money will come probably depends, on like a lot of things like, well, how much is enough and living on it, I think would be difficult for most people.
Nearly everybody. Yeah.
But hey, I mean, it's not nothing. It's good. It does fulfill a lot. Even, the funny thing is I like writing. Sometimes I love it, but sometimes I don't love it. I'm like, 600 words today. How am I going to even do this kind of thing? Right. For your, quote unquote passion. Right. But I also really love like all the sort of trappings that go with it, like looking at a book cover, which one is going to be a good one, and doing a podcast, you know what I mean? Just like these kind of things are just really fulfilling and fun, fun fun. So that's part of why I do it too, is just I kind of the publishing journey part of it is kind of fun. Sometimes it's not so fun, but sometimes it's pretty fun.
You're learning. Yeah. And it is funny. And I would never recommend people get into writing for the trappings of it, but enjoying the trappings is totally valid. And, and it can be very kind of, this is a very narcissistic thing to say, but when you tell somebody you're a writer, you're immediately, I think, more interesting than most people that they're talking to, because they just don't meet a lot of people who write novels, and so they want to know about that. If I tell somebody like, oh, I'm a data consultant, they're like, okay, where are the hors d'oeuvres?
Right, 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 right,
We
right.
don't
Yeah.
care.
They
So
just show me their rash. That's about all that happens to me.
right, exactly. But yeah, and I think also regarding the money stuff, I think it's kind of that's the other big problem with writing is like how are you as the writer going to define success?
Yeah, that
You
is
know,
such a good point.
I defined success well before I made a dollar. You know, getting an agent to me when I started to understand that that was an incredibly difficult thing to do, and the fact that I had an agent, that to me felt like, wow, I won't say I've made it, but that is further than I ever expected to get with this. And then you set the next goal and make it
Right,
realistic, difficult to achieve, but realistic. And for me, that was, I just want one book published, just one
right,
book that I can show my kids in Barnes and Noble. Look, I did that. And then
right,
that happens and you keep stepping up. But if you're not careful, it's easy to feel like you're never successful, especially if you determine success to be, I want to, make $500,000 a year writing
right,
books.
right,
You are setting yourself up for failure because that's point oh
right.
oh oh whatever percent.
Exactly. Right, right. And I think the other way you can set yourself up for failure is comparing yourself to other people.
Right,
And
which is really hard not to do.
oh my, I mean, envy is like what? It's one of the seven sins, I think, or I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not that.
Compare and despair is the term I've heard.
Yeah, because it just is stupid. And they're probably comparing themselves to someone else. And,
Right.
it's not like there's less for you if someone else does well. Like, I never really think of it that way, but you still just feel like,
Right.
But I think it's human nature. And as
Right.
much as you can sort of say, you know what, it's okay.
Right.
And it's all good. And,
Right.
think of what you've done and be grateful for what you have. That's the best way, I
Totally.
think, to deal with it.
100%, Sandra. I mean, I remember my partner once, I was kind of grumbling to her a little bit about, somebody's Facebook post or Instagram post. I'm like, oh man, they've just done this and that's amazing, but I wish that were happening. And I'm like, sometimes people post stuff and it's hard for me. And she's like, well, I assume there's some people out there who say that about you. And then I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Right, 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 right.
But I mean, I think since that time, I have become much better about it because I have, to your point, I think you're right, gratitude. Hey, I've reached a place, if I'm not supporting myself financially 100% doing this, I'm in a place where most people don't get to. And I'm so thankful for that because I know, a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is kind of making your own luck by being
Right.
consistent and being vulnerable and willing to learn and get better. But I look at some people who have this greater success than me, and now I try to get to the point of like, good for them. And
Right.
hey, I think I'm just as good as they are, and it just hasn't happened. That thing hasn't happened for me yet, but it certainly is possible. Like the
Right.
best could always be yet to come as a writer, and I love that about writing. You
It's
could
true.
be 90.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely true. Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
But people must, I assume one of the questions you get, probably first and foremost, because I know I get it and I'm not a doctor, is how do you possibly find the time to do
Right.
this? And what is your answer to them?
Well, it's funny because my husband is like so sick of that question.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, how do you do it?" And it's
Right. You're
kind of funny.
amazing.
Right, right, right. And I'll throw him a bone. I'll be like, my husband is so helpful, but really, I mean, that is part of it, having a supportive family. But I think it's probably the way you do it is just having a habit where you try to write every day.
Yes. Yeah. You
If you
mentioned
don't write,
earlier 600 words.
right.
Is that your daily goal?
Well, actually, I used to. It's funny. I've kind of gone in between. 500 is where I started. Then I was like, that's not enough. 750. But then you can just start writing crap, to get to 750. That's not helpful.
Right. It takes a
So,
while to build the muscle for those words.
right. So I think if I hit 500, I'm happy. If I
Yeah.
go over it, great. But if you hit 500, you've at least got a draft in 6 months. That's not bad.
That's That's much better than not bad. And
Right.
you and I are very similar to this. So I'm a daily writer, 7 days a week, with maybe a total of 5 to 7 days off for the entire year, because I love it. But 500 words, I'm 500 words right now. I'm more at like 600 because I'm trying to reach a goal.
Right.
But like you said, that's if your goal is a book a year, 500 words, an hour a day. For me, that's about an hour a day.
Right.
And that's 1 hour less of watching TV mindlessly at night. That's not, trying to change my life to make time for this crazy thing. It's
Right. Right.
very
It's
achievable.
it's like a part-time job in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
That doesn't really pay you, but you're an intern.
But you know what? If you think of it like that, like, okay, you're writing an hour, and then sometimes obviously when you're doing edits, it's longer, and like you could find that you're lost for 4 hours and you're just enthralled in a trance kind of, sometimes when that happens.
Right.
But if you think about it in general, if you're doing an hour a day, like really, should you be expecting to make like a ton of money? No,
Right.
maybe not.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right. But what you do is, I think, if you are that consistent writer and you are the person who is willing to take rejection,
Right.
your investment is a 20-year payoff, right? Like
Right.
it might be
That's a
20
good way to look
years
at it.
before you
Right.
have your breakout, but that breakout's going to make more. It's not going to make you millions of dollars, most likely,
Right.
but that'll catch you up a little bit. But it's
Right.
a long apprenticeship.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. I never really looked at it that way. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, to add in there that not every book I've written got published,
Me too.
so
My first three didn't.
right. So, you hope, but sometimes it'll be maybe not the best. I don't know. I think the business has gotten harder. I don't know. I feel like it
Yeah,
has.
my my agent told me that. She said this year, she said, from at least from the agenting perspective, she's like, it's harder than ever to land an agent. And, I think, I don't know, this is a total guess, but that obviously people get frustrated and they give up and they're like, well, I'm just going to self-publish this. And then you just have, there's just more volume of work that's available in front of consumers' eyes than ever. And that makes it more difficult for, more traditionally published writers. It makes it more difficult for the reading public to figure out what's good and what's not good.
Right. Right.
And I have nothing against self-publishing, but I think it does. It's an avenue that just helps to flood the marketplace a little bit.
And it's harder. I mean, I think you see these success stories that are just sort of like our success stories. I mean, it's 0.0001 whatever that can
Yeah.
actually, really make a huge dent. Self-publishing, I think it's harder, but it's a valid option, like you're saying, totally valid option.
Yes. It's a lot
Yeah,
more
no, I,
legwork.
I just mean like I think publishing is getting a publishing gig, like getting your book published, I guess I'll just put it that way, I think is harder than it used to be. But part of that is because there's so much more to do. You can go on Netflix, you can go on the computer, like there's just so
Or
much
just your
more.
phone.
Right.
Yeah,
That your
totally.
eyes are, that are competing for your eyeballs at this point.
Right, right. Because we're not competing with each other. Nobody's saying, well, I just spent $15 on a Sandra Block paperback, so I'm not going to buy Carter's.
Right.
But you are competing with Netflix. You are competing with just idle time on the phone.
Right.
And, the reading public is diminishing. But yet then you see signs of life that are heartening. Like you see
Right.
Barnes and Noble is actively building new bookstores. So it's like, when's the last time that's happened? So there are things out there where that do give you hope. And then you read an article about these tech bros who are like, their goal is to publish 8,000 AI generated books. And it's just like, oh God damn it. Like what?
Yeah.
Like that's just the grossest thing I've ever heard.
I agree. My husband just told me because he is a law school professor, that he heard of a humanities course. I don't know the college. It's just starting. The course is all like the syllabus and everything is computer generated, AI generated. the books are AI generated. And, I don't know, like if you're supposed to write AI generated papers or not, that I don't know. But what I think is hilarious about that is like, really? I mean, are there not any good books out there that you should really just be reading AI books? I mean, there's
Yeah,
kind of like, there's probably, George Eliot I don't know. There seems to be there's some good books out there you could probably read, but I don't know.
that's crazy though.
Right. It is. It is.
Yeah. And it'll continue to evolve, but the idea that it would replace the humanity of writing, and I there's certain things on Netflix or certain books I read that I'm like, yeah, this is very formulaic, and I
Right.
understand how that serves a purpose. And some people just want their books to hit certain strides because
Right.
that's what they're used to. And you could see that being kind of an AI generated book a little
Right.
bit.
Right.
That's
Right.
taken to extreme. But if you want any kind of character adherence and have that sense of empathy while you're reading, I don't know. I don't know how you do that if it's just kind of formulaic like that.
Right. Or how you create a voice that's, authentic, but
Right.
I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah. So we sound like a couple old people.
Hey, I'm gonna yell at the sky, right? Get off
Right.
my lawn.
Right, exactly. And I want to talk just for a little bit because you and I also shared the fact that we've been with multiple publishers. I've been with Source Books now for I think 6 books, but I was certainly with my first 4, bouncing around a little bit, and it is it's exciting and it's scary, and you don't know what kind of support you're going to get with every publisher. But is that a difficult journey each time you do that, or is it like, all right, do you feel more confident now making demands of a publisher, whereas kind of when we first start where it's like, whatever you say I'll do, and if you don't want to do any marketing, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think they could just be like, F you. No,
Yeah.
I don't know. The smaller publishers too aren't going to do as much, but even the
Right.
bigger publishers don't necessarily do as much.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's, I would love to have one that I feel is really like my home. I would like that, but it just hasn't turned out that way. And that's okay. I
Yeah.
think as long as I feel like the books are reaching people and that, I feel like I'm writing to my potential, then that's okay.
And you're all standalones like me, right?
My first 3 was a series. It was
Oh,
sort
your
of a
first 3 were series.
trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, it's been standalones. I even had a YA thrown in there, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, in general, it has been. I actually really enjoyed writing the series, but I don't know. I think that's a little harder to sell necessarily, kind of. I don't know.
It's got to be done, right? You got to say,
Right.
I have these 3 books that are done as a series, which
Right.
is a huge gamble on the writer's part.
Right. And probably the publisher's part.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember even bringing that up once. And I don't have anything against series. I just have never found that thing that I wanted to write as a series. But I remember just having this conversation once, and I think it was maybe with my agent. And it's just, they're like, a lot of times, especially if you're just establishing yourself, the publisher's not going to be like, well, we don't even know how the first one is going to sell. So that's
Right.
hard for us to commit to 3. And so it's rare. I don't know if rare is the right word, but it's like you said, it's more difficult to have that series deal. But if you do have that series deal, it can be very lucrative.
Well, it ended up being just kind of a weird thing for me because it's a Zoe Goldman series. She's the psychiatrist. And I wrote
Hmm.
the first book. And then while I got an agent, but still didn't have a publisher, I was writing the second book. I was like, Zoe's still talking to me. I'm going to write the next Zoe. So when I ended up getting a book deal, and it was between 2 publishers, so it was kind of a good thing that hasn't really happened since that I've been like playing off people. But one of the things was, well, okay, the one said, all right, well, we'll give you a 2-book deal. And the other publisher wasn't doing that. So to me, that was like just a no-brainer. I mean, if you're
Right.
going to be, and so they were like, do you have another book by chance? I was like, well, I wrote another Zoe. And they're like, all right. So that is totally by chance how that happened. Otherwise,
Wow, that's amazing.
I don't think it would have happened otherwise, you know?
Right. And then you're not even on deadline. You're like, here it is.
Right. Right.
That's amazing.
And it was like 52,000 words. I was like, oh, here it is. And it worked out really well, but you know.
But you probably had to add more to that, right? Or did they publish?
Correct. Yeah. No, I did. But it was good because they could say, actually, we really like this premise and we like this, but why don't you think about adding this or this? And then it just worked out, you know. But
yeah, that's great. That's that's rare for sure.
Right.
And how was the release of the Bachelorette Party? Was this the first time you were with this? Was this the first book with this publisher?
First time. Yep. And it's very funny because the editor, Louisa, is my college roommate's sister.
Wow,
I know,
that's random.
isn't that funny? A different one than the one I was talking about, but Nell is her name. And when I saw it, I was like, there can't be that many, you know, that just seems that so name, weird. Right. I mean, that would be involved in books and all that stuff. So that was a nice connection. And it's really funny because what I remember of her is more like being the annoying little sister. Not from my standpoint. I didn't think she was an annoying little sister, but her sister did. So, you know what I mean? So from like, that's kind of the reflection I remember. Yeah. And then, but now they're obviously, you know, they're way past that, but it's still funny to me to think of it that way. But yeah, no, she was great. And the team was great. And I felt very supported. But, you know, it's different being with a smaller publisher. I'm sure, you know, it's just, there are differences, some better, some worse. But I thought they were great. Be happy to do another book with them. And, you know, I think it really kind of depends on the book, and it's not all about the publisher. It's sort of about just the maybe the zeitgeist, you know, of the book at that time. So.
Right. And you can't control that. You can't even really, you shouldn't even really be thinking about it. You should just be writing what you want to write. And then if it, because I've written things that have hit because of the mood of the general public at that time. And then I've written other things that I think were just a miss because it was important to me to write. I loved it, but it just didn't resonate as much. So you just, you never know. And if you try to write to market, you're screwed.
Right. You just never know. Right.
So are you working on something new for them or?
Yeah, we just submitted, so we'll see what happens for the auction. And that was like a week ago or something, so it's very new. And it's sort of like a, you know, closed island mystery on a Hawaiian island, and you know, it's very Agatha Christie. In fact, one of the characters is like, we are living an Agatha Christie novel, you know? So
wink.
Right, exactly. Wink, nudge, nudge. So, but we'll see. I like it. I like it a lot. I think there were times when I was really kind of just dismayed with it, but in the end, it all came together and I like it. So we'll see. You know, well,
is that a little different for you? Because I think my impression has been you've been more traditionally like kind of thriller versus, you know, hard-boiled mystery where there's clues and, you know, that sounds a little bit like what you're describing now.
It's still definitely more thriller than mystery. I would say that. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing with the Bachelorette Party is some of the, like, I don't read reviews on the whole, but sometimes you'll see something pop up. And people would talk about that it was just really scary. Like it was really scary to them, which I thought was funny because, well, of course you try to make it that way, but I didn't think it was particularly more scary than anything else I'd written. But I must have hit a atmosphere that I hadn't before because it was a funny thing. It was a happy thing to hear.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is you never know what's going to hit somebody, or a collective group of people that is totally dissonant with how you would
See
view it.
it.
And
Right.
I'm almost always scarier than what I think.
Right.
And I'm like, maybe my scare threshold is higher, but like I don't like watching scary movies and stuff.
Right. Right.
And I'll
Right.
write a scene and they'll be like, holy shit.
Right.
I'm like, really? I thought that
Right.
was a hopeful scene.
Right. 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 Or there's a little gore because I also don't like really, really gory movies, but
No.
and then they'll be like, oh, that was just too much or something. And I'll be thinking, really? Again,
Yeah. But I
there's
think
a
it's
little
also
blood.
like if you, because I think I'm like you like this as well. Like I do have gore in my books, but it doesn't occur often at all if it
Right.
occurs once or twice. So I think but then when I get to that once or twice, I'm going to make a count,
Right.
because I am trying to convey like this shit is real.
Right.
And if this happens, it's a really horrifying situation. And I'm
Right.
trying to express that this could happen to you. And so
Right.
I think that it makes the impact a little bit greater when you use it sparingly, but then when you use it with a hammer.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I think that's absolutely true. And that's like 100% in the Bachelorette Party. Like the denouement is so much about that just, visceral feeling of being stabbed, that I hope
right.
people will get. And that's exactly right. Like I wanted every sentence to just vibrate with that,
Right.
fear and pain and everything like that.
Right. I know. And then like, what kind of
Right.
childhood did you have? Like,
Right.
give me credit for my
What's wrong with
imagination, would
you?
you?
Right.
Well, Sandra, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our own little storytelling. This is the making it up portion of the show, where I've selected 3 books at random from my bookshelves. And you're going to choose one of those books, and we're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and then that'll be the first sentence in like a 2-minute long short story. So I'm going to read that sentence, then you give me the next 1 or 2 sentences. I'll do 1 or 2 sentences, and then we'll have a little short story that
Oh,
I'll.
good. So you're contributing. That's good.
Oh, 100%. I never.
Okay.
So it's improv. So we have to
Okay.
just rely on each other for this. I never make anyone do it themselves.
Okay.
I've got Kristen Perrin's How to Solve Your Own Murder. Um, Speaking of Locked Island Mystery, I have Stuart Turton's The Last Murder at the End of the World. And Mindy Mejia's A World of Hurt. So
Well,
choose
those
one of
all
those
look
3.
good.
They're all
But let's
good.
go for that the end of the world one. That sounded kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
so this is Stu's, and he released it this year. It's great. It's so original. He's a fantastic writer. So give me a page between 1 and 340.
28.
Okay, we're going to go early. So I'm going to quickly scan page 28 and see if I can. This is the beginning of a chapter. Um, let's see. All right. You do whatever you want with this.
Okay.
They've been chasing them from shadow to shadow for the last 20 minutes.
They've been chasing them. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to figure this out. Okay. They don't know where she could be heading. She seems to be darting in and out of alleys, avoiding someone. But who could she be avoiding?
Jeremy told the rest of the group that he was going to make a hard left. He had a suspicion about the shadows in front of a large office building where she might be hiding. As he got closer, he could hear labored breathing.
She heard footsteps behind her and realized she had to confront him or he would never stop chasing her. So she stood up and moved around the corner and said, "Here I am."
He was still ensconced in his own shadows, and she wasn't 100% sure which of them it was. But she knew she had a decision to make, and she thought it a little funny that for her entire adult life, she carried a knife in her purse, a just-in-case knife that she never ever thought she would use, but now might be the time.
It's one or the other. And the decision will probably change her life. The decision might even take her life. But is she ready to take a life herself? She doesn't know. She puts her hand on the blade, on the handle of the blade, and says, "Jeremy, why are you following me?"
She knew the question was more of a stall tactic than necessary. And as he started to answer some innocuous false answer, she expertly flicked the blade open with her thumb, something she had practiced many times before. His talking obscured the sound of the 4-inch blade clicking into place.
And she thrust it into the person next to Jeremy, who was, after all, the real villain in her story.
All right, I think we call it there. I think
All
we got
right.
our murder. That got violent very quickly. Good for her.
You got to
That
make
guy
a
had
choice.
it coming, whatever he did.
Yeah.
Well, Sandra, it's so great to see your face and to talk to you and to catch up a little bit after our whirlwind tour those many years ago.
I know. It would be fun to do again, something like
Absolutely.
that.
And,
Yeah.
congratulations on the release of the Bachelorette Party. And I can't wait to see what happens next from you.
And congratulations on all your success, too. I follow you admiringly.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. So great to catch up. We'll chat soon. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, friends, that is it. That is my conversation with Sandra Block. And we made up a nifty little story at the end there. That was about to get, or I guess it did get a little violent. There was a blade thrust into a person. So that, I think, qualifies as true violence. Sandra's latest book is The Bachelorette Party. So please check that out. You can go to her website, which is sandraablock.com, and hop on over to carterwilson.com. You can pre-order my book, Tell Me What You Did, which comes out January 28th. Sign up for my newsletter. Check out my appearances. I'll have a bunch of those early next year. And you can hop on over to unboundwriter.com and see all the writing, coaching things that I'm doing there that may be of interest to you. That is it, friends. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. Another episode out just next week. Thank you, my friends, for watching and or listening to this. And as always, take care.